Hi, it's Mark back with another Photoshop tutorial, or rather a Lightroom tutorial. Actually, it's both, because today we're going to be looking at tablets. I use a tablet when I'm editing a lot in Photoshop and in Lightroom, and I have been asked a question about what settings I use and how I set it up. So today we're going to be looking at how to arrange your tablets. Not quite like that. We're going to be spending a little bit of time in here. So for the Wacom tablet, and there are other flavors and they will have similar screens, you have a series of buttons you can assign. You've got screen area you can look at, how you set up your pen, what controls you actually put on your pen for Lightroom, what controls you put on your pen for Photoshop, what functions you assign to the buttons for Photoshop, what functions you assign for Lightroom, and so on. There's a fair bit to get through, but we'll keep it generic as we can, and then we'll look at a few examples of why I think everyone should ditch their mouse and swap over to using a tablet and pen. Okay, before we start, let's extol some of the virtues I think of the tablet. So we're in Photoshop. You've got a paintbrush in here. We're on black over here. It's a soft brush, 250, but if I just stroke ever so slightly, I can get this very fine, and if I press hard, I can get it to, so I can transfer the paint or the effect or the mask adjustment by pen pressure, adjusting the opacity and adjusting the size. That is one main advantages of using the pen. And the other thing is, with the pen, is just by pressing on one of the little buttons on it, I can actually change the size of my brush by dragging my cursor to the right and left, or the opacity. So now we're 100% hardness, sorry, not opacity, 100% hardness, but I can also change the opacity as well, and just the size without going up here, without changing things here, without hitting left and right bracket keys to make that. And then of course you can use it just like a pen. How easy is that to do with the mouse? Okay, that bit over, let's go over into Lightroom and show how some of this will actually work on an edit. So here we are in Lightroom, and this is a picture of the bandstand in Exhibition Park in Newcastle. Just an exercise I did in Colourpop. It was a bit intricate, some of the selecting and painting. I used it as a kind of a painting trial to myself to get all the finials done freehand and separate the colour from the black and white. But one of the things I really like about Lightroom, regardless of whether you're using a pen or a mouse, when you do something like an adjustment brush, which is here, and let's say we bump the exposure up a bit, and we want to brighten this area here, let's have a back off on our flow and our density, is that I can just come and brush. I'm holding down my mouse as I'm brushing, and I can do that there. If I want to do a bit more over here, I can choose to change these. Now this won't look as good, I'm deliberately going a bit over the top, so I've bumped those right up, and now again, still with the mouse, I click and apply that. You can see if I bring this up now, that is far more intense than it was over here. But this is one of the things about Lightroom. You can obviously adjust the effect afterwards once you've applied it, because it just really records where you've put it, not what, and then you can come and apply any of these texture, white shadows, whatever. But sticking with exposure for the moment, the brush has honoured the fact that this was more dense than that. So whereas you can change the overall effect of what you've painted, it still is mindful of the fact that you chose the flow and such to be more intense here, and that's a good thing. But the downside of the mouse is that in order to do that, I had to keep coming over and adjusting these, then coming back to do more painting. So let's press delete, leave these on quite strong, have those at 100 and come over to my pen. So I've now got my pen and I come over here and I just gently just tapping away there, bearing in mind I've got this quite strong. And over here I'm going to press quite hard. Now it won't look very good on the picture. I'm not trying to do a good edit on this side, it's deliberate, but I'll press hard. And you can see straight away I've got more intense coming through. Back over here, in here, I'm just going to press ever so lightly. The flashing, by the way, the reds, is just my presentation mode. It helps identify for video recordings where my cursor is and when I'm actually touching the canvas. So there I've got fantastic control. None of this coming back over here, adjusting the flow and density and such and coming back. I can do it all intuitively just by gentle or otherwise yuck, and that is a great tool to allow it to be very, very subtle. So that's at least one of the ways you can use the pen pressure to your advantage in Lightroom. Let's jump back into Photoshop and look at another way we can use this. Then ultimately, after a few examples, I'll show you how I've set my particular pen and tablet up and why I use those particular settings. So here we are in Photoshop and we're going to do an edit on this picture. All of this, of course, can be done with the mouse. Well, most of it can be done with the mouse, so there's nothing really special about it other than the fact that it is easier. But I will also point out as we go through, and before I just share my actual settings, some of the things that people find difficult with the tablet at first. And I think that one of the main ones would be accuracy and hesitancy. So as you can see, you can see that my pen is not actually touching the tablet, but it still responds to it, and it's only when I actually touch do you actually get the effect applied, and that's fine because but because of that, when you're using the pen for things like menus, so let's say we come up here and we go layer or image, and I'm running across these and up and down and through the menus, I can make it quite precise on which ones I want to choose by actually keeping pressure on. So here you can see I'm actually touching, and I find that much easier because I get more control over running back and through and choosing. Whereas if I went layer and lifted off and then came on, I don't know, image, where were we? Image, each time, adjustments, lifted off, then it's you can sometimes, depending on mapping, and we'll come to mapping, the sun's decided to stream through the window, so it's making this a bit more contrast. It can be, it can be a little bit more difficult, but if you actually press and hold and slide the pen across and come down through, look how much more precise that actually is for what you actually want to do. So that's one tip I'll give you. Actually press and hold when you're actually running through things. So anyway, we'll throw in a couple of other tips as well. I need to move this over here because I need to get into my layers. Hope that doesn't confuse you too much. Okay, so I'm going to make a duplicate copy of this. For my own particular setup, of course, I just need to press that button there, which makes the copy for me. And what I want to do is I want to tidy up the sand in this picture. I want to make it very smooth sand, and there's a couple of ways you can go about that in Photoshop. My preferred way, usually if there's not too big a job to do, is using the clone stamp tool. So S, of course, for the clone stamp tool, not C. I keep pressing C generally, and of course C gives me my crop tool. So it's S for clone stamp tool. And then you'd sample the area close by, so such as where my mouse is now, hold down the Option key or Alt on a PC, press the sample, and then you can just come and paint over, and it samples from that area and puts it in place. And you can keep going with that, depending on how rough and ready the colours and shades are in where you're sampling from. You may want to keep resampling, just so the blend is easier. For example, you wouldn't want to sample up here and then be filling in something down here. Control Z. That'd be one way of going through it. Another way of going through it would be to take a copy of the layer again, So I'll do it old school, so Command or Control J, and then let's put a filter on that, blur, motion blur, and quite strong. So there we've got a motion blur on. I know it's not layout, but we're going to sort that in a minute. Click OK. Then you could put a mask on there. Just click on the mask button. Control I to invert it, or you could have held Option or Alt key first, then clicked on your layer mask, and it would have come up black anyway. Then with a brush, B for brush. That sun is incredible. Hang on a second. Right, there you go. And now the clouds are going to come back, aren't they? Where were we? Yes, so you've got a brush tool, B for brush tool, and you want to make a brush quite big. I can use the rotary dial here. I can use bracket keys. I can do the trick before I showed you, which you just hold down on there and move up and down for hardness, left and right for size. And once I've got a brush with white as my foreground colour, I can start just brush in and start bringing the blurred layer behind to suit. Another way of doing this, which I think is quite interesting, I delete that. I want a copy of it, don't you? Is to actually make a selection first, and this is one of the tips I wanted to share with you. So using my marquee tool, I'm actually going to select up to the horizon of the sand. Then I'm going to use my filter. Motion blur was the last one I used at those settings, so I'm quite happy to select it here. If I wanted different settings, of course, I would come back down to blur gallery and click motion blur again, but I'm quite happy with what I did last time. And that's put that in. Again, it's impacted Lee, but that's neither here nor there for the moment. And Control D. So that's one of the tips I wanted to share with you. The fact that you can apply a selection, be it a rectangle, circle, or custom, whatever, and then apply an effect, and it automatically inherits it into there. To do this properly, I'm going to delete that there. To do this properly, we'd want to remove Lee from the picture. So I'm just going to take another copy, and in this one, I'm going to use my patch selection tool and just do a rough selection around Lee. It doesn't have to be precise on this. That's not because I don't want it to be precise, it's because Lee's such a small part of the overall picture here. And I'm just going to slide her out of the way, somewhere like there. Control D. Having got rid of Lee, we could then actually apply the filter and apply that motion blur back on the screen. And then use this one and bring Lee back in. I want to hide her, so Alt and click on the mask. Now, how do I know where to brush her back in? And this is another tip. I sometimes, in a technique like this, I do that rather than make big selections. And all I do now is I just remove the density of the mask, so that Lee would appear back in. I'm going to zoom in, slide my canvas across, and then with a brush, white brush, D for default. I've got white as my foreground. Bring the size of the brush down, however you want to do it. And then you can start painting. I don't have to be massively precise, I say, because the colours immediately beyond Lee's outline are already still there on the canvas. So this is the one where it is so much easier with a pen. Just to come and do this. Nearly there. And then we just take the density back up and finish off. So there you go. That's another tip when you're using selections and masking things out. It's a bit of a reversal, really. Control 0 to get back in. It's a bit counterintuitive that you should hide it, then reveal a little bit to do it. Instead of selecting in the first place, 99 times out of 100, I would still probably select in the first place. But on something like this, where it isn't a massive part of it, it is so easy to do. And just lower the opacity, lower the density, sorry, and away you go. Okay, let's talk about the thing which I think most people will struggle with. I certainly did until I got used to my tablet, and that is the mapping area. So if we go to my system preferences, to there, and come into my tablet, which is there, and let's go to functions. We want to go to, sorry, won't be on the pen, all things mapping. Now here I set my mapping up so that my whole screen area is represented by the whole area bounded down here, bounded by these. Incidentally, on this tablet you can also have it in mouse mode, so then you can actually use your finger to work as a normal mouse, clicking and double clicking. At the moment I don't actually do that at all, I leave it purely on the pen. So where were we? Yes, so the whole screen is there. So if I'm in this corner on my tablet, there, and I want to be in the far corner of my screen, I just move my pen down to there. I don't need to keep dragging if I use my mouse. From there, drag, lift and move to get a bit more space, lift and move, lift and move. I don't need to do that. However, I have seen it recommended that you use a smaller area of your tablet. Bear with me. What happened there? My screensaver came in, and the reason it came in is because my screensaver is bottom right hand corner, and if you look where my finger is here, I'm getting towards the bottom right hand corner, but I'm only this part into the tablet. So from there to there is the whole screen. Now that could be great if I was brushing away and painting, because with a tiny movement of my hand, if you see, I can cover the entire area. So if I'm doing a watercolour and applying washes, that could be very good. But if you notice how jerky my mouse is, and I'm trying to keep my pointer is, and I'm trying to keep it still, it is very now difficult, and I'm not doing this deliberately, to now be up in the menus here, click on one, and it just is so close together. A minute movement on the screen makes it show. So let's get back to, it's difficult for me to actually find the portion because I've got a 27, there's my screensaver again. Purely because I went somewhere further down than about there on this tablet, and it thought I was in the bottom right hand corner. I know I'm doing this to a little bit of an extreme here because I want to demonstrate it, but putting it onto a full mapping is so much more gentle, so much more smooth, so much more control, and you get a better control, overall control. It is as simple as that. Okay, while we've got this here, let's look at how I've got my things set up for Lightroom or on Photoshop. So stay on Photoshop. So on the pen, I've got Command Option M set as my bottom click. You can see the buttons on the pen just on the top there. So there's bottom one, and when you're in Photoshop, that, as you've seen before, brings up things for modifying. Okay, and if I do a right click, it is just literally a right click. So a right click of a mouse would bring up in the brush tool this box. So that's the buttons. When we are in Lightroom, I've got it set up purely as I would my mouse. It's a click and a right click. And in both instances, I think this is important as well, is pressure sensitivity. I mentioned before about holding down when you go through menus, actually pressing on the screen, moving down gives you more control, but so does sensitivity. If I move my tip to be very, very soft, then if I just tiniest touch, you can see all that pressure, the pressure bar runs over. Why is that important? Well, the pressure is the amount of transference I get. At the head of the video I showed how I could draw very, very faintly, then get thicker just by adjusting pressure. Well, if all that pressure is condensed into a tiny little touch, it's difficult to do. However, if you bring it over to firm, then I've actually, you can see and hear it, I've actually got to press. So I can actually control now how far along that actually goes with how much pressure I want to apply. See, I can actually, because that's in my control now. Whereas when it was at soft, it wasn't. So depending on how that's set, you might find that you get nothing out of your pen. It's too quick, too jerky, it's throwing loads of paint or effect on with the slightest bit of touch. So that is another thing to consider. So we've talked about mapping and we've talked about that as a boon to helping. So let's go. We're still in Photoshop, so let's have a look now at the functions. My functions are very practical. They're all just main steps: undo and redo. So Control Z or not. A new merged layer. Create a new layer from scratch. Copy a layer. You've seen me use some of these already, and the space bar. Just while I'm here and you want to move something around, you just press your space bar to hold it. It's 6 and 1.5 a dozen the other really for me, but that's how I've got that set up. And if we come over to Lightroom, I've got undo and redo, which again, just to keep the common ones, because between the applications. And then when I'm in Lightroom, if I click on the third one down, it opens it up into Photoshop for editing. My most common thing in Lightroom, let's find Lightroom. The picture I've done. Let's go to the Bowie and develop. So when I'm in Lightroom, one of the most common ones I do in terms of local adjustments is the brush tool. So, and that's my button here. So again, I would just go B, and it opens up the brush tool straight away for me to start working with. Let's come back to this. What else do I do? Yeah, oh yes, edit in Photoshop. I think I demonstrated it earlier, but if not, it's the third one down. I'm working on this and I think, you know what? I need to edit in Photoshop. So I'll just, away we go. But then I could also have edit in some of the other tools and techniques, and there's that abstract picture of David Bowie. I don't want to save it. So let's go back preferences. The only other thing really to cover off here is the dial, the dial in the middle, so the touch ring. So when I'm in Lightroom, I don't use them all. So when I'm in Lightroom, I've actually got that button and that one. And every time I press, if you see here, every time I press, it jumps to that one, jumps to that one, jumps to that one, and it cycles through. I've got those two disabled. This one is just brush size, and this is for zooming. So if I jump back to Photoshop, that one is zooming and that one is brush size. So again, I've used common form and function so that I don't have to remember, oh, how much have I changed for between the applications. In Photoshop though, I do add some others. If I've got a whole bunch of layers down here, I can just have that on cycle that, and it'll just run down through the layers for me over here. And rotate. Why do I have rotate? Well, again, that's back in my digital art, I suppose. If you had a picture and you're more comfortable with it, bear with me, if you're more comfortable, you find yourself naturally more comfortable drawing that way. Whereas if you had to draw from left to right to do the same thing, you might find you've got a more natural style. The way to tell that really is just grab a piece of paper. I'll be back, hang on a second. So the way to tell that would be if you ask yourself to draw a box, say, and you found that you have your paper on an angle. If your paper was dead set in front of you, draw the box. Or put the paper on an angle and draw a box. You'll find, and it's the same with writing, do you write better like that, or do you write with the prim and proper in front of you? You'll find there's an orientation, and based on that orientation, you might want to, when you be more precise with some of the edits, you might simply just want to add that orientation in before you then start doing your edits, because you find it's easier. I naturally find that an angle like this is better for me. This sort of motion, and again it helps, I guess, with how the hand is working. So of course the other way to do that, turn your tablet, but but you can't just keep twisting your tablet each time when you've got a simple key to do. Anyway, that's more precise for I guess more digital art stuff. But there you go. That is a rundown of how I set things up. There's a few tips in there about masking, about changing the opacity of your mask while you're actually working with it. If you found this useful, please click on subscribe and click the notification so you get told of new videos when they come along. And look for ideas for the videos. This was, as I say, in response to someone asking me about my tablet settings. And I guess that's it really. Nothing more to do or say. Bye.